Cats, cops, and C4. It takes about a minute before people start squirming and 2 minutes for them to start waking up. It's 2.5 minutes after the Knoll Cascade that Chief Bowman walks in holding her head. I must admit, an officer you can drop null on and they start just arresting downward criminals is useful, she says, still headache-inducing. They're joined by other officers that were in the far side of the station. The tri-tight paneling in the walls must have protected them somewhat. After all, police stations have to account for literal teleportation and find a counter. The cheapest way to deal with it is walls with thin tri-tight sheets and a lot of corners with cameras. Here, I have proper cuffs. You don't have to take their belts off, Teresa says, and Shank chuckles a bit. Right, sorry. I'm still on adrenaline, so I'm not quite thinking clearly, Shank says as he reaches into the box that Teresa has brought and pulls out a large number of cuffs. So that thing you were bringing, what was it? She asks. You'll see for yourself soon enough, Shank assures her. I was watching the feed. It was taken. The duplicate was taken. The original was passed off to a teleporting ally who's going to bring it back along with an expert. Maybe also our cloaking opponent and thief as well. The flash. I couldn't see anything during that. Correct. Well done. I can't take the credit. Private Stream in the intelligence division pulled that fast one. I just played along when the little bugger showed up with a duplicate. Isn't calling someone a bugger an insult? She asks. I have mixed feelings over the Private Stream persona. It makes sense, it's useful, but, well, their intelligence. If someone's going to do something shady and immoral among the Undaunted, it's going to be them. I've sanctioned undercover operations myself. It's not really a surprise to me at all, Teresa says as she cuffs another gang member. It's necessary. You can't just divine insight from beyond to find the criminal and cruel. I can't roll some dice and somehow figure out where all the stashes of illegal weapons, drugs, non-licensed cloning vats, or the millions upon millions of other kind of highly illegal and immoral bases are. You hold them as distinct categories? Chink asks. He cuffs his last gang member and then hefts her up. I can give us a head start on locking these girls up while we talk. You're a machine, Shank Barnabas, Teresa says with a grin. And yes, they're distinct. Some silly girl using a cheap chem lab in her own home to cook herself some non-prescription pills is mostly fine. She's only endangering and hurting herself. If she starts trying to sell it to others or force it on others, then we have a problem. Ah, so it's much the same like a gob grabbing scrap parts and making a monster vehicle. Until she starts stealing parts or using it in public, it's fine. Exactly. Now it's technically illegal to do either of those things without a certification as a chemist or mechanic. But that law mostly exists as another charge to slap onto the really egregious offenders. You'd think they'd be trimmed down. Every police chief in every precinct agrees with that, believe me. We're technically our own conspiracy to try and make our damn jobs easier. I suppose having to scan through petabytes of information to do your job is a bit over the top. It is, but lawmakers don't like undoing their work. So, Teresa shrugs at this as she tries to pick up a criminal and struggles hard. Schenk, on the other hand, casually has a woman tucked under each arm. I'll get the doors then. Thank you. By the way, what was in the fake? I don't really know, but if I were to guess, it's nothing, a lot of sarcasm or a very nasty surprise. Did you and yours just bomb a criminal organization? There are far more destructive forces we bring to bear than mere explosions. Such as, run, fucking run! The previously composed and in-control woman screams out as her forces get taken apart behind her. She hadn't done anything wrong. Well, anything unwise in the course of her actions to get one over on one of her rivals. She sat back, observed, and was ready to take advantage of the situation with a force of skilled thieves, assassins, and spies. She hadn't even been all that tempted when the ship full of men had showed up and was simply content to let other people do the job for her. She was proven correct when the entire thing was hacked and all the information found its way into her hands. Sure, sorting the facts from the fiction was a challenge, especially when the humans started mixing the facts, fiction, and fantasy together in a clear and rather effective obfuscation campaign. But it had been worth it and easy. Only move when you have overwhelming advantage. So when Miss Big had lost one of her assets in a way that could compromise her, She jumped on the chance and sent her best agent. The Landrak had overheard this and decided to try and make friends with Miss Big by sending one of her remote suits to try and destroy the evidence and earn a favor. That brought the attention of War Lady Klava because she hated the Landrak and was going to oppose her every time she moved. And then for some reason, Edge of the Nox Sisterhood had shown up too. That was a mess. It was a bigger mess when the human super soldier revealed himself to have a Takra and Empty Handmaster for wives, and he had been willing and able to fight the Landrak's combat drone and her own agent at the same time. She thought she had a last-second victory. She had been in orbit with how high and heady she felt. Then she opened it, and a small black device blinked a red light at her. It didn't look like Miss Big's work, and that was when two men, bedecked in black armor, with masks covering their faces, teleported to the beacon she just activated. Then they put her through the wall. Her faithful servants had sounded the alert and were swarming the two men, but it only seemed to be feeding them. They countered the invisibility with smoke bombs of some kind, and it veiled their movements, as well as outlining her invisible faithful and exposing the illusions where they stand. They speak a guttural human language that she identifies as English, but has no idea what they're saying. Thankfully, she's nearly safe. Her hidden safe room is flawlessly disguised. Alpha destroys another plasma rifle as it's being used as a flamethrower. The standard design of the weapon relies too much on axiom effects to reinforce it against the sheer heat. A bullet in the right place on its frame and the big thing melts itself. He can feel Omega judging him for hip firing, but he's good at hip firing. It's only a bad thing if you miss. Omega, on the other hand, has decided that he'd prefer knife work, which, to be fair, the man is very good with that thing. But his habit of forging new ones out of scrap metal and then gifting them to the non-combat undaunted is odd. Granted, most if not all of them kept the knives. They were good knives. But leaving a handcrafted knife and leather sheath with their names stitched into the side on someone's pillow had damn near gotten ghost stories started. A monosword is swung at him from an angle that all he can see is a slight distortion in the air. He catches the blade and forces back the cloak holding it before snapping her legs at the ankles and leaving her to drop to the floor screaming. A bit of a twist, and the blade embeds itself into a plasma cannon, and the weapon overheats and is reduced to slag. "Think she has enough of a head start?" Omega asks blandly as he pries apart an endless barrage before it can be used. "Let's give her another minute. I want to see if she has a panic room," Alpha replies as he leans away from the thermal bloom of a laser that he had just dodged. You always had to dodge a laser by a great deal. The thermal bloom could turn the beam into a thermal detonation anywhere along the length at any time. Sure, it ate the power of the beam up like nothing else, but it also meant it could suddenly bulge anywhere along its length. And that's usually where they keep all their backups anyways. Omega agrees even as he breaks apart the cybernetic limbs of an enforcer. The fact he was using his knife to more lever things open than to actually cut showed volumes about their plan. Not that the enemy parties were paying attention to a detail like that, only noticing that, "Run! Fucking run!" The boss's command echoes around and both men smirk under their masks as the women break and flee. "I'll take the eastern half," Alpha says, and Omega nods with a jaunty, two-fingered salute, despite the man being in neither the Polish Armed Forces or the Cub Scouts. What none of the silly women noticed is that they had all been systematically hit with trackers. They looked like shrapnel, felt like shrapnel, and since they were all in non-vital areas, were being ignored until the girls felt safe enough to dig them out, which just made this too easy. Well, me for one, and I'm not even the most dangerous undaunted, Chunk says after a moment of trying to keep back the laughter. Still, when we have things under full control here again, we're going to get the evidence delivered again. And if they don't? I have access to the intelligence division, and I'm willing to march in there and start dragging out whatever sawed-off little prick is playing stupid by the ear to your desk to explain himself. Chink growls out. "It's a rare moment that I want someone to be difficult and obstinate," Teresa says with a barely contained laugh. One that breaches containment as Chink slowly turns his head to give her a flat look. More people are stirring, and the axiom has cleared enough that the lower-powered technology that runs off it is reactivating. "You resist this surprisingly well," Chink compliments Teresa. "I can carry it with me into a place like this. Resist the current a bit. When I was field girl, I had bad..." luck and was often called into freshly knolled areas to make arrests. It takes a while, but there are some tricks to keep yourself standing. Why aren't they taught? It sounds like a brilliant trick for an officer to have, because it's one of those things that's trivial to explain and monstrously difficult to do. I carry Calm Axiom with me and harden it just past my skin to wear it like a suit. That's easy to explain, but doing it in just the right way to resist the null after effect is borderline impossible and unique to each person. We all have different axiom auras after all. Oh, that makes sense. Although it does mean that null stays a very effective weapon against everything but humans. And it's a good thing we're such a non-violent, law-abiding, and cooperative species. Cenk says, and Teresa laughs so hard she starts coughing. They had saved the leader for last, mostly because the woman clearly wasn't much of a fighter when caught off guard. Which is fair. Not everyone's the field type. You need your commanders, your farmers, your miners, your factory workers, and so much more to make even one military man, let alone one of their skill and strength. But still frustrated? Omega asks him. I know that the mission going better than expected is a good thing, but I really wanted to take on an entire space empire. Alpha admits as he puts the explosive on the ceiling. It was the last of 4 shaped charges. I feel that, Omega notes even as he hefts the hated weapon. Jek-Tech plasma cannons could cut clean through a tank and breach a bunker's wall wide enough to walk through. But the range was so bad you were in danger of being run over by the tank if you wanted to try it. And this model in particular had all the subtlety of a gang of bikers minus the mufflers. Munitions primed, Alpha says as he steps out of the line of fire and draws his own clownishly overlarge weapon that needs to warm up before firing. Time to scare the bitch. Omega notes and Alpha triggers the explosion. The cloaken woman in the chair she had been sitting in falls screaming through the newly made hole in her panic room floor. She lands hard and then starts hyperventilating as her head is held still by the muzzles of 2 growling and glowing plasma cannons.